I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. It's the Wednesday show, and he's back by popular demand. People seem to like this guy. I don't know why. I'm not really sure. I always thought, get a female co-host. It's like a different in voices and the whole thing. But people seem to like this guy. He's been helping me run PureVitaminClub.com, PureCoffeeClub.com, and also NSNG Foods, which sells ultra fat. And we're going to ask him how those companies are doing right after we bring him. Oh, let's bring him in right now, folks. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Chris Shaffer. Yeah. Yeah, there he is. And folks, we're going to have a special guest on. We have him sitting here with us right now. If you're watching the video, Joseph Raney is on. How you doing, Joe?
Good, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing great. You're going to have to hang with us a little bit because Chris, I want to ask you right up front. People have been asking, rightly so, what's going on with the vitamins, and the coffee is running like spinning like a top, but the vitamins and also the foods company, we've been slow at getting stuff out. I mean, we've been back, literally back by months on the vitamins, and we keep telling people, look, stick with us. It's coming around. But we've had a long road, and that road, we're seeing light. I'm mixing my metaphors already. We're seeing light at the end of a tunnel to where we can actually see the road again. And when this show comes out, we're going to be well on our way. We've talked about what happened. It all started back at the end of the pandemic, where we had big time supply chain breaks. So that was a problem. And then that led to some of the companies we deal with to get these supplies lying to us and telling us, oh, they're going to be in. They're going to be there. Literally, Chris, you can back me up on this. Sometimes it'll be there tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and goes. Next week comes and goes. We were being lied to left and right. And then things started happening within my company. Some of the people working for us started lying to me. Unfortunately, we had people. It was like, "Hey, are you guys answering the customer service?" Oh yeah, we answer every call every day. And they weren't. Right. I'm taking credit for all that went wrong. It's all on me because I was listening to people who worked for me and they were lying to me. Bottom line, I wish, I'm the face of this company and I was being lied to. Therefore, I was telling you guys untruths based on what I was being told. So it wasn't until Chris and I started doing some deep dives, right, Chris? You want to take over and explain a little bit, or how am I doing with this?
Yeah, it's funny. Joseph and I were having this conversation, Vinny, before you joined us to sit down and record, and you used the same metaphor I did, which was light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's more like we got off the highway and then realized we had no headlights, right? Like there's just nothing going on, and should have known, but did not until we started digging into stuff. And realistically, we're still working to make things, the word make things right is probably not the right phrase, but keep everything moving in the right direction. And I told Joseph, I said, for 2 or 3 months now, we keep feeling like we're at the end of the tunnel. And then one more thing pops up, right? It's the old Steve Jobs, one more thing. But in this case, instead of it being a brand new shiny iPhone, it's a landmine or a hand grenade or some sort of small thermonuclear device that seems to just keep knocking us down. But kind of like the greatest Philadelphia hero, Rocky Balboa, we're just going to keep getting back up. It's not really a problem. The good news, Vinny, on the NSNG food side of things, I don't know how much of this we've shared on the show, but we had always fulfilled those orders ourselves, and that was becoming a problem because of volume, thanks to y'all, right? Like,
Yeah.
quite frankly, we can only hire as many people as we can. We can only ship as many things as we can. And so a couple months ago, we started the process of moving that to the company that fulfills our vitamins, which allows us to know exactly when things went out. It allows us to share tracking with people and do all of those kinds of things. We are still catching up on a lot of the back orders from that time period, but things have started shipping. So if you have a back order, please let me know. People have been both very gracious and also not shy, which I love, right? They're like, hey, can you let me know? And you can find me on Twitter at NSNG Chris at purevitaminclub.com, or you can send an email to support, right? Support at purevitaminclub.com is always the best way, because that's something I have a little bit of insight into. Yeah. On the Pure Vitamin Club side of things, B12 is back. We may, Vinny, I know we let everybody know that the Omega is on a temporary pause, but we had a supplier that we've used for some other things in the past step up and say, hey, we want to try it, and we're going to do a test run of it. And if Vinny and I like what they come up with, then that may be coming back sooner rather than later. But if that plays out for people, we'll let everybody know there. B12 is back. Magnesium is literally coming into the warehouse as we speak, and vitamin D is on the way to the warehouse, meaning everything that's on a back order right now within the next week or two is going to be headed out to people. If anybody wants to know where their order status is or exactly when it's going to ship, I can't tell you the day, but I can give you within a day or two basically of when it's going to go out. And if you say, hey, I didn't see a shipping notification yet, again, just send a smoke signal, a carrier pigeon, an email, a tweet, a text, whatever it is that you want to do to try to get support from us. And we get back to as many of those as possible on a daily basis. Our goal is to get back to all of those. With everything we've had going on, sometimes it may take 36 hours to get back to people, but we are trying to call and text and tweet and all of those things to make sure everybody is taken care of.
Yeah, and
I know the beginning of this year, you and I were kind of hyper optimistic, and I don't think we said it publicly, but we said, oh yeah, by like April we'll have this thing squared away. And with everything else that's come up, right, we've hit every pothole on the way. The good news though is everything's finally headed in the right direction, and by the right direction, I mean literally on its way to the warehouse, which means as soon as they get it checked in, it'll be headed out to people, which is where it should be. As much as I love our products, I don't need tens of thousands of bottles of magnesium just for me. And so the fact that we're going to start getting that out to people within the next few days makes me a very happy camper, because as much as I love doing customer service, I'd much rather be doing the rest of the business stuff and making sure that we're getting the future things that we need and the other products that Vinny and I have been talking about behind the scenes, and the big kind of unannounced thing, which is some big changes to the websites and the way that ordering is going to work and some of those kinds of things. So getting back to the business of making things easier for people rather than making things as complex as humanly possible.
Chris, it comes down to the old saying, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And, things just happened along the way. And you could say I took my eye off the ball, which there's some truth in that, because I was busy keeping my eye on the ball of the part of the company I run, right? I couldn't do everything. And then Chris and I decided, well, turns out we're going to have to do everything. And coming back with the EPA-DHA product, the reason we had to cancel that is not like our company has gone away. It's not. We could not get the high-end products that we sell. I wasn't about to put some, rancid, dilapidated fish oil in a capsule just to say, hey guys, here it is. We're very particular about the fish oil. We put krill in there. We do a lot of things that make this thing above and beyond anything else on the market. And if I can't sell that, I ain't selling it. So that's why that's been suspended for a while until we know for a fact that we can do it the way it was done before. And yes, we haven't stopped thinking about other products that I think you guys are going to be very excited about. Enough about that. Chris, I've said for years, and even I'm going to name drop here. My friend, Mike Rowe, said to me, Vinny, you're out there creating babies. People who could not have babies in the past and this and that and the whole thing. And I famously said on Mike's show, I said, yeah, we're creating baby, meaning people who doctors told them, you know, you can't conceive. Now, this is not Joseph Raney's situation. He and his wife are doing just fine on the conception thing. They're on child number 2. But as I mentioned to Mike, a lot of kids went NSNG. Their doctor told them, if you want a kid, you better start adopting. And a lot of people did do that. But a lot of people went NSNG, and all of a sudden, the wife got pregnant. Right? So there it is. And it didn't happen once or twice. I mean, we have tens of thousands of people who, you know, pay attention to NSNG. It's been a lot. I don't know if it's 50, 100, I don't know, but it's been a lot of people who have said to me over the years, I wish we had kept track of that, but we didn't. I've always said, with all of those babies being born, could just one parent name their newborn Vinny? Just one. Toss a brother.
Obviously Vinny, right?
I don't care how they spell it. And I've even said, if it's a girl, it should be like a girl name like Vinni, right? Pronounced Vinny, right? That would be a great thing to do. Yet no one has said that they've done that until I was having my second consult the other day with one Mr. Joseph Raney. Joseph, let's bring you in. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
Good. Joseph, let's talk about your NSNG journey, right? Tell us about you. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess the NSNG journey kind of began because, you know, I'm a chef, and, you know, I'm in the culinary world, and not necessarily the health food world. I'm in the more of the fine dining aspect of things. And I opened a business. My wife and I, we moved here from California, and then we opened a fine dining restaurant in a really small town. And it's been going awesome. But about year 3, I was just so focused on the business that I put my health kind of on the back burner. And in years past, you know, I worked out, I went to the gym, but I was eating like the brown rice, the chicken with the fat off of it, the broccoli, you know, eating those 6 tiny meals a day, you know, all that stuff. And I remember just looking at my stomach one time and thinking, holy shit, I've never been this before. Like I'm starting to look like a chef. And you know, I got on the scale and I was 240 pounds.
How tall? How tall
I'm,
is it?
I'm 6'3".
Okay.
And so, you know, it's fine. But, you know, I'd always been under 200. I'd never been over 200 in my whole entire life. And I kept getting healthy again on the back burner. And I noticed it was because it was just so demotivating. The idea of having to go back to those tiny little meals and the brown rice and the crappy boiled chicken and all that stuff all over again. It was just so daunting. And I just remember it was like 2 a.m. I was laying in bed, I was on my phone, and I was just like, there's got to be a better way. And I was flipping through, you know, just anything. I saw a bunch of stuff, but Vinny's picture kind of, and the title Fitness Confidential, that kind of caught me. You know, I was like, oh, okay, check this out. And, you know, when you read that book, you get Vinny's sense of humor before you get into it. And so it started off as very entertaining, but then as you're reading it, you're reading all these things that you always sensed was right, but that people always told you was wrong. And you're just, you know, I just felt like I was kind of punched in the face, but then I got excited again. And the day after that, I was like, I'm gonna try this. You know, I'm gonna try to eat fat, protein. you know, I had some confusions along the way. You know, the NSNG thing threw me off at the beginning. I remember I was eating potatoes, and then I learned that, oh, okay, you know, I just listened to it. Then I got on your podcast, and I was like, man, I've been sitting here eating potatoes for like 2 months. And then Vinny's like, oh no, potato, you count that as sugar. And not only is it sugar, it's higher in sugar than sugar.
Yeah, it's more sugar than sugar.
Yeah. And so I was just shocked.
But doesn't it have resistant starch, Vinny?
Well, yeah, you know, that's what, look.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Since you brought that up, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off, Joseph.
I had that conversation this week. My mom. I know you'd get that.
My mom called me. She goes, Vinny, LSU just released a rice that's lower carb. It says resistance rice. It's a new. I said, Ma, it's like you went from smoking filterless Camels to smoking filtered cigarettes. It's not, you know, it's not any better. Resistant starches will not do any better than anything else. As a matter of fact, back in 2008, after I decided to go low carb, I started using a product. I won't even mention the name anymore, but it was a resistant starch that you could drink, hoping that I was doing better. But it's like, okay, it's giving me the same kick as, you know, sugar or maltodextrin. So obviously this is not. I was trying to do whatever I could on the bike because there wasn't anything like ultra fat back then. That was the reason I created ultra fat for myself. The early name for it was, I called it Vinergy. Vinny's Energy, right? I was never going to market it, but I would make Vinergy at home. As a matter of fact, back when I was doing mountain bike races in the 90s, these 24-hour mountain bike races, I would mix peanut butter, like the good stuff, not Jif, but good healthy peanut butter. It was just peanuts with butter. I would melt butter and mix it in there and put honey in it. So I had protein, fat, and some carbs. And I found that sustained me longer when I was doing a 24-hour mountain bike race. Because on a mountain bike race, it's not like a road bike race. You know, if you're doing a loop on the mountain, the first half an hour to 40 minutes of that loop, you're in zone 4. You're hammering up a mountain, and then you're cruising down. And I would take a scoop of Vinergy. I had a Tupperware thing of it. Someone would be there with a spoon of Vinergy. I put it in my mouth, guzzle some water, and take off for another lap, and do that for 24 hours. Right. So, you know, if I did that once an hour, I was getting 24 servings of Vinergy, which was mostly fat and protein and a little carbohydrate in there along, you know, because you get some carbs from the peanuts also. And it worked like a charm. So I knew high fat, high protein can keep you going for a long time. It wasn't until I had the balls to try it without the sugar and went, oh my God. And then I figured out better than butter, we can use medium chain triglycerides, coconut oil. So it mutated over time. That's how I got to ultra fat. It started with Vinergy. And
if you guys aren't watching the video, when Vinny said peanut butter, butter, and honey, we just watched Joseph's heart break because he went, what? And his little chef brain, heart, and stomach went, not so keen on that combo, but if it works, I guess it works.
And the other problem with Vinergy is you got to make it and keep it chilled, because now you have butter in there. You can't let it go rancid. So that's the other reason I went, oh, let me get something more stable that doesn't have to be refrigerated. At any rate, resistant starches never really worked, right? And they never will. Not for my mom with her LSU rice, not for your mom with her. And by putting a potato, if you put a potato, after you cook it, you put it in the fridge and let it get cold. And then once you reheat it, some of the starches become resistant to, your body just passes it through. But again, it's filterless Camels versus a filtered cigarette. You're going to still get cancer. You're going to still get tar and nicotine. You're not doing anything. Does that clear it up?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to totally derail Joseph's story, but I know that's a question we get all the time, and it's
Yeah.
something that you hear as a
Mhm.
myth, right? And Joseph, you even said, I thought I was doing the right thing because it's not a grain, it's not a sugar, and the only thing you ever hear about it for the last 5 years is if you cook it and you cool it, right? Same thing with
Yeah.
white rice, cook it and
Right.
cool it, and then it's okay. But when you
Yeah.
see no sugars, no grains, you go, well, grains, rice is a grain, so I'm not going to do that. Let me do the other thing that everyone
Yep.
else says is totally
Yeah.
fine. And then
Yeah.
you have the realization that that is essentially a tablespoon of sugar, just straight.
Right. I even made that mistake with a lot of fruits. I just, and then I ended up staying away from all fruit once I was like, oh crap, I got to stay away from all this. And then, then I learned, okay, well, if you want some, that's fine, but stick with the berries and the cherries and, all that stuff. And then I was like, oh, this is great. Now I could go, put a little bit of that in me. And it was just, with everything, it's just a learning process. And we I, I'm sure there's more that I'm gonna be like, wait a minute, so
But you don't look like a 240-pound man now. You're 6'3". How much do you weigh now?
185.
180. Can you imagine, Chris?
Yeah, and I lost that first 40 pounds, I want to say in about 6 months, and that was with the mistake of eating potatoes for that month.
Yeah.
And I used to also really enjoy a beer, and I think in the last 3 years, I've probably had 4 beers, which, in my industry, that's hard to do, because
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by a lot of this stuff and I have to understand it and talk with suppliers and all that. But, that was definitely a thing I gave up. And then I eventually got to a point where I just did not crave it anymore, and so uh, the alcohol, I think, is what, you know, once I felt like I was getting to a plateau, and then you cut out all that stuff, and it's just like it was just constant. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I lost 40 pounds in like 6 months. This is wild." And then quickly got back down, to 185 just shortly after that. And that's kind of where I kind of fluctuate in between 185 and 190 now.
Yeah, when you think about it, a lot of times people who are morbidly obese, and you were right at morbid obesity if you just take the actual term. Some doctors would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're doing okay at 6'3", but
Right. Right.
30 years ago, a doctor would have said, "Dude, you got weight to lose." Now they go, "Oh, you're okay," because they're looking at 450-pound people, 500-pound people
Mhm.
daily.
Yep.
I used to bring this doctor. You didn't hear the show back in the early days, Joseph, but we used to bring a friend of mine on who was a hospitalist at the biggest hospital in Los Angeles. I won't mention the name of the hospital, but she ran the hospital. And we called her Dr. X on the show so that we can bring her on and let her talk freely. And she would tell stories like one time they found, not one time, but they find food trapped in the folds of people who are like 600 pounds. Like the person will come in the hospital for something else, and the nurses will smell this odor, right? That doesn't smell like any other human or bodily odor.
Yeah.
And they'll find like where a sandwich or something was like stuck. It's sad. And she would tell these stories because that's what goes on, right? And the mayo or whatever would get dilapidated or whatever, and these people couldn't smell it on their own bodies.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Mhm.
That's the human condition. There's nothing to laugh about. There's nothing to joke about. One time they found, I don't even want to mention, they found something in a woman's vagina that literally, if I told the story, I don't tell the story anymore because it would make you puke if I told you what they pulled out. And the woman had become sepsis and the whole thing. But they were able to save her once they found it. And they don't know how it got in there. But yeah, you hear all of these stories. I should probably bring Dr. X back on, Chris. We haven't had her on in a long time. I wouldn't be able to run video on her because she doesn't want her face to be seen. But yeah, it's crazy what you hear, right? You got yourself under control. But when morbidly obese people tell me, well, when I go to the coffee shop, I see everyone getting a croissant or a scone or something else. And why can't I have one? It's like, because you've already cased that chip in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't live like everyone else. You now have a medical condition that we're trying to fix. Right. And you can't have a scone. You can't. And they're going, it's just not fair. Yeah, it's not. You can remain 500 pounds and be dead very soon, or you can take your life back. You have that option. Right. And when I talk like this, it sounds like I'm being very hard on people. And I don't mean it to be that way, but no one else is willing to tell the truth anymore. We have we talk about pandemics and epidemics and everything else. More people die from morbid obesity in this country than died during the whole pandemic. Bottom line. You want to challenge me on that? I can prove it. And, this ain't something that a vaccine is going to cure. Ivermectin ain't going to touch it. None of it. Nothing's going to fix it unless you fix yourself. And doctors, these poor doctors tell me all the time, they'll go, Vinny, you don't understand the problem. We can't even weigh people anymore. They take it as an aggression if we ask them to get on a scale. It's an aggression. If that's where we are FUCKED. We are. And, you could go shoot every head of every insurance company in the back, but guess what? We're going to still have a problem, right? Healthcare is rampant. Doctors don't know what to do. We have a problem in this country, and love him or hate him, no one brought it up until RFK brought it up during the last election. And I'm not going to sit here and get into politics. I don't give a fuck who you voted for. I really don't care. Not one iota. But if someone is willing to stand up and go, you know what? Time to make America healthy again, I'm cheering that guy on, right? I've even said, hey, you want me to bring back physical education into schools? I will do that job for free. I don't want one government dollar. Bring me in, RFK. I will re-implement the physical fitness test. I will make sure every kid is getting out there and sweating the way we did. I will do things that your uncle did back in 1961. I will do them. I will bring it back. Give me that opportunity. And if you don't want me to do it, find someone who will. Don't just put some celebrity in that position who's going to go out and say, hey, we're going to do this, and then don't do anything. I will work. I don't care if there's a right-wing guy or a left-wing guy in office. I want to fix America's health. And I want to do it through exercise, and I want to do it through diet. Bring me on. Folks, we're going to take a quick break here, and we will be right back. Villa Capelli, the longest running sponsor of this podcast. Go check out Villa Capelli right now. You get 10% off. Villa Capelli is an olive oil, folks. You want to get 10% off, put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE. Villa Capelli, we use it here. You want olive oil that's not cut with seed oils, you want Villa Capelli, let them know we sent you. VillaCapelli.com. Or you can go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the Villa Capelli banner. It'll take you to the same place. But be sure to put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, no wimpy Y. We are on the Wednesday show. We're talking to Chris Shaffer, and we have our new best friend, Joseph Raney, in the room. Joseph, I'm glad you got your health back, but that's not why we had you on the show today. You have a son. He's got the coolest name ever. Tell everyone what your son's name is, Joseph.
His name is Roark. So ROARK. So it's like roar with a K at the end. And, but the name I chose my wife's pregnant again. And so, like Vinny said, we had a consult, I think it was about 7 or 8 months ago. And she had just gotten pregnant. So I had some questions about that and just my own personal health and workout routine. But, just jokingly, Vinny had said, yeah, no one's ever meant, name their kid after me. We laughed it off. And as I was driving, home, I thought to myself, I really like that name, Vinny, number one. But I've always wanted to name my kids after my heroes. And Howard Rourke is what I named my son after, but I used the last name as the first. But the reason why that name is so powerful to me is very similar to why I'm going to name my next kid, whether it's a girl or a boy, Vinny. And that is because in this book, it's called The Fountainhead. It's basically individualism versus collectivism, second-handedness versus individuality. And it's basically a world that is trying to destroy this person who is passionate about building things. And he's doing it his way, the way that is true and right. But there's a society around him that is just trying to, they're second-handers, they're the cool kids. They're the kids everyone wants to be, but Howard Rourke doesn't care. He just wants to do what's right. He just wants to do what he's passionate about. And so I was thinking about it and I thought, Howard Rourke is the nonfiction version of this hero, and Vinny is the real version of the living version of Rourke.
If I'm remembering, did Rand write that book?
Yeah, it was Ayn Rand.
Yeah, and Rourke is pretty much the protagonist in that book, and he, if I remember right, is he more of a individualist or some sort of centralist? Or explain who Howard Rourke is in the book. I remember the book from years and years ago. I have a bit of a photographic memory, and I just don't remember much about. I just remember him being the central character in the book.
Yeah, he's an individualist. That's he's his main passion is architecture, and so he's an individualist. He does things because he thinks they're right. He goes to school and they show him all these old things, old buildings and all that. And he is like, that's fine. And I know that at one time we can appreciate it, but that doesn't mean we need to keep designing all of our buildings around this way. There's facts, and then there's things we need to move on from. And he basically gets in this kind of thing where he has a bunch of people who are literally trying to destroy him through media. There's a character named, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he basically writes articles destroying Rourke because he doesn't want him to succeed. And he's basically trying to get Rourke on the side so that he can conform to that side, but Rourke never does. Even though he's broke, he's poor, he's not getting the financial stability that he would get if he would just accept and go work for these firms.
Was there someone named Wyman, or is Wyman
it was Gail Wynand.
Wyndon, yeah, Wyndon or Wynan? What is it?
Gail Wynand was basically someone who,
he was like a tabloid guy, like he would just put shit out.
And he admired Rourke so much, but he could never live up to Rourke's standards. So he was kind of like, he would, eventually at the end of the book, he kind of sacrifices his soul to society while Rourke never does. And so I thought, watching you, Vinny, getting to know you, I don't know you personally, but just through your podcast and seeing how you run your life, you have helped me lose weight, and you've helped me basically with a lot of things. When you get on this train, your life is affected in so many different ways than you never would have even thought. It's not really about getting healthy. It's really about changing your whole entire lifestyle, everything, how you feel, your depression. My wife had something called a pseudocerebral tumor in her brain. And it was basically her brain thought that there was a tumor when there really wasn't. And these doctors put her on this medication for a long time. And so I just remember her crying because of the side effects, and she just didn't want to do it. And I said, Eliza, why don't you just try this and just see? I mean, what do you have to lose? And she did, and she was off that medication in 3 weeks. And
Really?
all those symptoms completely went away. She
Wow.
had headaches every night. She couldn't sleep. Her eyes were bulging. Her, just so many things. It scared the shit out of me because, we're relatively young, and we were planning on having kids, and it just freaked me out. But it completely just 180. There's just so many things, but more than that, I mean, that's enough, on its own for me to name my child Vinny. But more than that, watching you basically not conforming, not being okay with putting shitty ingredients in your vitamins, not being okay with putting shitty ingredients in your nut butters, not being okay with any of that, even though, you've told stories about people wanting to pay you just so they could slap your name on there, and you saying no.
Yeah.
You could be a very, very wealthy man the same way Rourke could have been a wealthy man, but decided that you're going to build your own wealth inside, and hopefully that'll match your financial situation as well. And so that's what I admire most about you is all that. I mean, yes, the health. I don't want that to go. I don't want to diminish the importance of that too, but your character is the thing that I, not to sound gay, but fell in love with about you. And
That's not gay at all. And
yeah.
nothing wrong with being gay. But can I say this? Because I can let you go on for another 20 minutes because you're talking about me and comparing me to a fictional character that was a hero.
Yeah.
As Mike Rowe tells me, he goes, "You're a jagged little pill that Forrest Gump's his way through life," which is kind of Rourke,
Yep.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard for me to look inside and go, "Oh, that's what I'm doing."
Right.
My problem is I have trouble telling a lie because I don't know how to back up the lie. It's always been, I guess it becomes a virtue not to lie. And Chris knows this about me because Chris knows me off camera. It's a virtue not to lie. And people go, "Oh, you're always telling the truth, whether it hurts or not." It's like, yeah, but sometimes that gets me into more trouble than if I just told a white lie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's good and it's bad, right? To be in my skin, because it's like, well, when I wrote the book, it's like I'm just going to put it out there.
Yeah.
When I started the podcast, I'm just going to put it out there and just tell the truth. And sometimes the truth comes with getting kicked off of Wikipedia for telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
or being shadow banned across social media for telling the truth, right? And being called, a kook, or I love, one of my favorites is they call me a climate denier. I don't even know what that term means.
Joseph touched on something in his story that I think is the real reason he resonates so much with Rourke in the book, right? You said it's about secondhandism, pushing things off versus taking personal responsibility. Joseph, I don't want to gross the audience out, but I know I had a similar moment. You said you looked down and saw that you had a gut. Did you look down, or did you catch yourself in the mirror?
No, I was literally on a couch like this with a glass of wine in my hand, and I looked and I was like, how did I get here? you know, I know I got here. I opened a business, and it was probably the most difficult thing I'd ever done in my life, and that's how I got there. But
I
you
had
know, it
I had that exact same moment, and that's when I made the change, right? I was 250 down to somewhere between 175 and 180 in my late 20s. And I had that same exact moment. And I think a lot of people have that moment. And
yeah.
that is the thing from your story that I think a lot of people can take away from it. But a lot of people also fall victim to the what about isms. And you were talking about Ayn Rand. Have you ever read Anthem?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan of her. I've read everything about her.
And by the way, folks, I think iron is spelled like Ann with a Y in there somewhere.
AYN.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm bad with names, but the book we're talking about is Fountainhead or The Fountainhead. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, The Fountainhead. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and I didn't read the other book. Tell me about the book you're talking about.
There's a famous line, and this is the connection that my brain makes in its weird roundabout way. I forget the exact story, but essentially they rediscover electricity. Right. It's very similar to Fountainhead in that there's, lost architecture in the Fountainhead or old architecture, and that's the way we need to do things. In Anthem, it's more about lost technology, right? And I forget if the guy's like a sewer worker or whatever, and he figures out that there's electric lights and like presents this to the world. And they say, but what about the candle makers? They're all going to lose their jobs. And that's the exact same thing that people have when they're making that decision about the diet. What about the pizza? What about all of the businesses that I support? What about the way that my family eats?
Yeah.
And Vinny, with you, but what about the cows? But what about the methane gas? We can't all eat that way because cows fart sometimes. Okay, that's not a valid response to maybe this is a healthier way to do things. And Joseph, one of the things that you said was, I don't want to have to eat 6 small meals of brown rice, right? And so you're like, maybe there's a different way. And it turns out there is. But even when there is that other way, then you run into, for lack of a better term, the system, right? I'm not going to say the deep state, because it's not necessarily the government. It's everything, right? It's the entire way that we've been taught to eat, the entire culture around that. And there will always be that excuse of, what about the candle makers, right? What about these other things that will be affected if we do the right thing? And
it's amazing. It's amazing how you're just trying to take care of yourself, and now you got to go have a bunch of philosophical, scientific conversations with a bunch of fucking doctors. And, you're just trying to take care of yourself. But I think that's why philosophy and this stuff is so important, because referring back to that book, I mean, we're in a society where you separate practicality versus morality. And what I love so much about that book is Rourke makes the moral the practical, and he's not willing to separate that. And I get that exact same feeling from Vinny when he talks about his endeavors so passionately. There's never been a moment that I've ever heard, I haven't listened to every podcast, but I listen to Vinny every day. I don't have time to go all the way through sometimes, but I've never heard a moment where he has ever separated those two. And that's very rare. I don't encounter a lot of people. There's people who, believe in honesty, but they're cheating on their wives. It's just kind of crazy. It's a crazy world. And, that's why I think what Vinny does is just so important.
Well, look, again, thank you for all the compliments, but it's when you're telling the truth, that there's your side and there's my side, and then there's a universal truth behind everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read the Stoics over the years, and I love reading and keeping up with the Stoics, and if you just stick to the truth, I'm just old enough, tail end at 62 years old, and because I'm Italian, and all of the Italians don't send old people to nursing homes, so I was living with some of my quote unquote ancestors that came from the old country, right? Who cooked and did everything. We were a family that worked by committee when I was young. And it ended with us because all of my brothers and everything, all of these people were now dead. We even had a family garden that was between 7 and 10 acres big, right? So everything we ate came out of the garden except for meat, right? And dairy that came from, we weren't Amish by any stretch, but, but we, it's like, oh, in my mind, everyone had a garden, right? That's just the way it worked. And you worked in the garden. It wasn't like, Vinny, you got to go spend your time. You wanted to go do it. I wanted to feel like a grown up and go out there with my great uncles, my grandfather's brothers, and learn how to, as they called it, crop, right, and do all that stuff. And my grandfather stopped hunting at some point, but his friends, these old men, these old Italian men, taught me how to hunt. My great grandfather taught me how to fish. And these people were eating meat and dairy and fish, and no one had a weight problem. No one had heart disease. No one had cancer. My grandmother had cancer. One of my grandmothers ended up dying of breast cancer, right? My mom's mother. But everyone else just lived these crazy long, healthy lives, and they were lean and mean. And then all of a sudden, we have this moment in time where they're saying, stop eating all of that, is going to kill you. And I'm looking at the old Tortoriches going, well, wait a minute. They had eggs every morning. They ate real butter. I never saw parquet or margarine or any of that stuff. They ate meat, chicken, fish, red meat. And I'm talking the cheapest cuts because they were broke, right? How can all of that be wrong, right? How could what they were doing all that time, and I'm going through Tulane and coming out of Tulane, and I'm learning all this stuff on the back end, and I'm going, wait a minute. They're saying if you don't eat fat, you can't get fat. Well, wait a minute. Why weren't these people fat, right? So it was this cognitive dissonance that I went through, and my brain couldn't let go of what I knew was right, even though everything I was being taught was the other way around. Mm-hmm. So that's when you start questioning authority. And of course, look, I'm not innocent. I was in Catholic school for 13 years. I questioned God. And when you can, if you're living in a deep South, in a religious family, and you're going to a Catholic school, and you have the audacity to question God, you're an outcast. And by the way, one Miss Mother Teresa questioned God. It was written about after her death. I think she talked about it before her death, where there were years upon years where she questioned if there was a God. And if Mother Teresa can do that, then I'm well within my rights, right?
I'll do you one better, Vinny. Jesus questioned God, right? If you are a Christian, the literal Son of God questioned God on the cross, right? Father, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
You can't get beyond that. So there shouldn't be anything above reproach, right? You should never be criticized or castigated for asking the question. And I think, Joseph, that's something from your story that really resonates with me. And I think it is one of the reasons that Vinny's message has gotten as big as it has. It's because there isn't anything above question. And if the right. point of all of this is to just find the right way to do things, then we should always question everything that we're doing. And if more information comes out, there's nothing wrong with information.
Yeah, I think diet just kind of gets there as like this thing that doesn't have any morality in it. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to get healthy. There's nothing moral about that. But then you realize you get to a point where you're like, this has everything to do with morality. This is, I never thought about tons of this stuff. I've been in the fine dining restaurant industry for almost 20 years. And, I make food to taste good. I've never made it to necessarily be healthy. It's never been in my mind. And now that I opened my restaurant, I've gone down this rabbit hole. I can't let it go. So we were using seed oils at our restaurant for, a couple years. And then I learned all this stuff. And every time I started using it, it was just like this guilt, this guilt, this guilt, and eventually I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. Is it 4 times more expensive for me to fill my fryer up with beef tallow than it is canola oil? Yes. But this is the right thing to do. Do I need to serve an NSNG fine dining menu? No. I'm going to be more on the I put life into living side of things. However, that doesn't mean I need to give everybody cancer. I don't need to do that. Our restaurant can afford to do that. And if it can't, then so many people appreciate that. And it's amazing how the response to me changing that was much greater than the fear of me resisting that change because of a financial stake in it.
And Joseph, you're not in New York, right?
No.
Like you're in a fairly small town, if I remember correctly.
Very small town.
So it's not like you have an unlimited customer base and could just make that move. Exactly. But making that change, you're saying, has led to an outpouring of support from the local community?
I've had people email me and say, thank you so much for doing that. I love coming to your restaurant, but I limit myself in a lot of restaurants because I can't do the seed oils and it's surprising that you find the people you're like, I didn't even know people cared about it. I just thought I was the only one. And maybe that's where the fear came from. Like, why am I going to do this for everyone when no one might not even care?
Let me say this, seed oils are now in the zeitgeist. When Nina Teisho's came on my show 10 years ago and brought it up, she brought it up in her book. That was the first time it was mentioned. Kate Shanahan picked up the torch and ran with it. And she came on the show 10, 11 years ago and started talking about it. And no one cared back then. Mm-hmm. And, I just saw the other day where someone connected me with Huberman on my Twitter where he's going, look, I don't want to throw a hand grenade in a room, but show me one study where seed oils are not good. He says, I'm not saying they're bad or good. I just want to know. And, the studies just aren't there because the only studies showing that they're good were done by the companies putting out seed oils because they have the most money. I tell people, eat seed oils, see how you feel. It's kind of like when you drink alcohol, you feel like crap.
Yep.
Therefore, we know alcohol is bad, right? Yep. You eat.
The difference is you feel good for a minute after you have a cocktail.
Yeah.
Vinny, have you ever had something deep fried in seed oils and went, I feel great. Let's go run a marathon. No, you waddle to the car.
Yeah, you feel sluggish right away.
Yeah. My parents make the joke every time the waitress comes, right? Of, oh, do you need anything else? Yeah, maybe a wheelbarrow, right? Yeah. Just to get me out of here. And it's because you immediately, like there is no feeling of elation after that. It's it's the immediate negative. And we seem to ignore that one because you don't you don't feel a hangover in the same way. It's just life when you're eating that all the time. Does that make sense?
I feel like I never thought about what happens to a guest when they leave. I've always thought about what happens to them when they're here. Right. And now I'm like, man, they probably feel 10 times better, when they leave here now that I've switched. And now to me, that's part of the experience. Like that has been a new question for me only because of NSNG. How are they going to feel after they leave? Like I said, I'm more of a life into living. I have desserts, I have sugary stuff, but there's been times where I'm like, this thing doesn't need that much sugar. There's been times I have that thought process now in my mind where it doesn't even need that, or I don't need, like, I'm more sugar resistant creatively now. I don't use sugar as a crutch or, and it's almost more of a challenge for me to try to get something in there that, I don't have to add something weird, or it's in my mind. Even our oils, just the olive oil and all that. I had to find, I looked at Villa Capelli, but there's just no way they can keep up with the amount.
It's too small. It's a boutique company. Look, Anna Vocino figured out the same thing. She goes, I'm going to put desserts in my cookbooks, and I'm going to cut the sugar down to a minimum. And it works. They're still good desserts.
In a lot of ways, it's better.
Oh, a lot better, because you're tasting the actual fruit or the chocolate or whatever it is that you're supposed to taste. And if you're going low carb for any period, if you go in NSNG, as I wrote in the book, you remap your taste buds and you're actually tasting things, right?
Yeah.
So, any final words before we go here? Because I promised to keep you for 40 minutes, and we're heading into an hour. We're like going head on into an hour here. So, any final words, Joe?
No, man. I just want to say thank you so much. And I know you're resistant towards, owning anybody's change, but just you putting that information out there. I know there's moments where you get kind of down, as anybody ever listening to me, and you've impacted my life in a lot of ways, and a lot of it, half of it has to do with food, but the other half of it just has to deal with your character. And I just want to say I appreciate that, and thank you so much for having me. It's a highlight of my life to be on an official podcast with Vinnie Tortorich. So thank you.
Well, those are very, very kind words. Thank you. Joe, hang around until after the show, because we have to upload this.
Okay.
Chris, anything on your end?
No, man. Joseph, I think you nailed it, right? If you can choose to make that change in your own life, you're going to start to see that on the food side, and then you're going to start to see that in the rest of your life. And hopefully, just like Joseph did, everybody can have a little bit of an impact on the people around them. Not everybody has the luxury of having, that sounds weird. Not everybody has the restaurant and can have change at that level, impact as many people as Joseph can with some of the changes that he made. But we can all make a few changes that affect other people in addition to ourselves. And it does start with you. It starts with you having that moment like Joseph did, like I did, like a lot of people listening to this podcast did, fixing yourself and then figuring out how you can help as many people as possible.
I don't know if the book is still in print, because The Fountainhead was written probably in the 1930s or 40s.
Yeah, 40s, I think. But yeah, I think it still is.
Folks, if it's on Amazon, I'm going to make it an instant classic in the Vinnie Book Club, because I've so forgotten about that book until you brought it up. And when you told me you named your kid Rourke, I figured it was Mickey Rourke. I didn't realize it was Roark. So if that book is still out there by Ian Rand, we'll figure it out. We'll get it on the Vinnie Book Club, because it is one of those books that is very interesting to read. So thank you for enlightening us today. You know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go there, go to VinnieTortorich.com. This is one of the last Wednesday shows of the year, I think. It might be one more. I haven't kept up with the Wednesdays, but if you're shopping for Christmas, or if you're buying groceries or whatever on Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com first. It doesn't cost you anything. It really helps us keep this show free forever. Puts a little coal on the fire, gets our train down the track. So on behalf of Chris Shaffer and Joseph Raney, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living, and let's do it with Pink Floyd.